much for inviting me here. It's a great honor to address this audience, definitely. A couple of words about myself. Unlike previous speakers, I'm not a journalist. I'm rather an analyst of international relations, focusing on different projects, but most recently trying to focus also on, yes, it is, I think it's here. Yes, exactly. Focusing on the role of digital technology in post-Soviet space, predominantly in Ukraine. So when Ukrainians went to the streets of Kiev for the first time in November of the last year, nobody could predict that this protest will eventually completely change Ukrainian politics, but also will have a very serious impact on the whole international system of international relations. So my presentation will be a very short, a brief overview, focusing on some aspects that are not that widely underlined in the public debate about recent events in Ukraine. So first of all, I would like to underline that what caused the protests in Ukraine was not the technology. It was like any other revolution that happened through the history. It was social and economic reasons which made people be not satisfied with the situation. Here's some data that show that people were not feeling that they actually have any impact on what is happening in their country. But definitely, that's true that technology has played a very significant role in the whole process. As one of previous speakers have underlined, that social media played a very significant role in coordination of events in Euromaidan, but I would like also to underline another very important aspect of technology, that is the connection of emotion that happened during these protests. It's a well-known picture that probably most of you have seen. What is important to understand is that when we are speaking about revolution, that it is easy to speak about the protest from such a wide statistical perspective, but ultimately it is a decision of thousands, maybe millions of people to go out into the streets and to protest. And in order to make those thousands of people to go outside, it is important that they feel not alone in their own dissatisfaction with the system. And here is something here is this aspect that shows the real significance of technology in this Ukrainian case. So social media, communication technology made this scale, this intensity, and a political nature of the movement that we all witnessed. One more thing that I would like to underline is that the movement as such was indeed very apolitical, in terms that Euromaidan did not promote any particular politician. It was a protest against the system, but not a promotion of any specific solution of the problems. But I will come back to it in a moment. So even before these protests bursted out, I was witnessing something like creation of two parallel media realities in Ukraine. One was the reality of so-called traditional majority, people who base their communication patterns on so-called traditional media, and another one was growing but still minority, a connected minority. And in early autumn of last year, my impression was that these two worlds were going apart. But eventually, the beginning of protest, and even more the brutal reaction of authorities, made these two worlds come closer together. And what happened is that this connected minority became a driving force of the whole very wide social movement that we know as Euromaidan in Ukraine. So if I would try to find one word to describe these events, I would say that it was a transparent revolution. This is how one of Ukrainian artists saw some archetypes of protesters. One of them is this new kind of journalist with a tablet, with a smartphone. So it is a transparent revolution in terms that, as it was already said, there is a lot of plenty of images. Every step of protesters, every step of police was captured by smartphones, by tablets, and was disseminated throughout the world. Let us fast forward to what we have today, to a continuation of Euromaidan, a logical continuation, and I mean a Russian aggression in Crimea. And what we have today is also a transparent war, I would say. Some pictures just to show you. Definitely it's not a complete image of this war, but what is interesting is once again this huge amount of images that we see from this war, from what is happening in Crimea, even despite the fact that there are some restrictions right now for traditional media to cover these events. Just to understand the meaning of this transparency, compare the amount of information that we had from Georgian war that happened in 2008, so not so long time ago, and actually the things that are happening right now in Crimea. So these are very transparent things that we are witnessing right now. But please do not regard me as a pure optimist, because this transparency, in my opinion, is not necessarily very exclusively a good thing. Because, once again, if you think about this huge amount of information that we have, it is actually very often hard to understand what is truth, what is not truth, something that that was already said in one of previous presentations. Also, I think that we tend, as societies, to believe black and white explanations of this situation. As a result, we have some stereotypical images about what is happening in Ukraine. One of them is this ideal one, another one is probably this one, that there are only fascists, nationalists, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to tell you which one is truth, which one is not. I'm simply presenting this clearly very different points of view on these events. Going straight to conclusions. My first conclusion is probably that what was the biggest strength of Euromaidan can right now become paradoxically its biggest weakness. It's a political nature. It's actually its appeal to total transparency, to total control over what politicians are doing. Because eventually I think that there is a risk that it will block some very necessary decisions to be taken. And I will simply quote Ivan Krastev, who said in one of his brilliant essays that transparency is not always a good ally of democracy. However, I'm not going to predict any development of events because this political situation in Ukraine is very unique right now. And what we have to do, as probably I'm speaking to everybody who is interested in these events, is to simply try to analyze, try to study these things, because I'm sure that they will help us understand our own the limits of democracy, actually, the threats of democracy in this interconnected information age in a very well manner. The second conclusion is regarding these events in Crimea, because something that is happening in my thesis is that it will be very hard to win this war around Crimea, because even though the West seems not to believe this story that is being told by Kremlin about fascists in Ukraine, many Russians and many people throughout the whole post-Soviet space actually do believe this thing. So in this perspective, even though not a single shot will probably be fired, hopefully, a Russian regime may win this war in terms of creating their own media reality in which many people will believe and will eventually make this the regime in Russia even stronger. Just to sum up, also showing you probably the very well-known illustration by Russian press of the events of 20th of February in Kiev. Unfortunately, I do not know how to translate the word Banderovцы in English, but it's about fascists. So it says that after capturing Ukraine, nationalists or fascists will target on Russia. So, summing up, the final idea that I would probably like to communicate is that I think that all these events in Ukraine show perfectly that Joseph Nye, in his brilliant book, The Future of Power, was right when he was saying that in an information age, it is not necessarily important whose army wins, but whose story wins. And this is something that we are witnessing right now in Ukraine. So thank you very much. Unfortunately, I will have to leave soon, but I will be here tomorrow. But if you'd like to definitely to communicate with me, there you have some contacts, so please. Thank you very much for attention.